It's 6:40 a.m. and a 44-year-old software architect is sitting in his garage, helmet already on, engine off. He isn't stalling, he's running a checklist he's run 3 mornings in a row. Tire pressure he already checked twice, a route he could draw with his eyes closed, the exact spot on the road where a neighbor's dog sometimes wanders, the exact turn where the sun hits the windshield of oncoming cars at this hour. His wife thinks he's just careful. His son thinks it's cool. Neither of them knows he's been having this exact morning in his head since he was 26. Here's what everyone assumes about a man who buys his first motorcycle at 44. Midlife crisis, compensating for the gray hair, the desk job, the 10 pounds he can't lose, trying to feel like the guy he used to be before life got heavy. That's the read. It's wrong. There's a real reason smart men take up writing later than almost everyone else. It has nothing to do with escaping who they are. It has everything to do with the same mind that built their career finally running the numbers and getting a different answer than it did 20 years ago. Nobody hands a 19-year-old the version of himself that exists at 44. He has to build it first, one careful decision at a time, long before he ever needs it for something like this. For years, he couldn't tell if the hesitation was wisdom or just fear wearing a smarter outfit. Every man who eventually rides asks himself that question first, usually for a decade or two, before he ever answers it. And for most of those years, nobody around him can tell the difference either, including him. Rewind to 26. His buddy just bought a used Kawasaki with money he didn't really have and asked if he wanted to go in on a second bike so they could ride together that summer. He said he'd think about it. That night he did what he always does. He ran the actual math. Insurance quote, hospital bills if it went wrong, the mortgage he'd just signed with a woman he was about to marry. The math didn't clear, so he said not yet. Watched his buddy ride off into the parking lot without him, and told himself it was the smart call. It was. That's the part nobody wants to admit. The men who wait aren't scared. They're doing the arithmetic the impulsive ones skip, and for a while the answer keeps coming back no, year after year, until one day it doesn't. Take a guy like Steven, 51, an ER nurse in Ohio. He'd wanted a bike since he was 19. For 3 decades, he watched patients come through his own hospital after motorcycle accidents and filed every detail away without meaning to. Helmet type, speed, road surface, what actually saved someone and what didn't. His co-workers assumed the job had scared him off riding for good. It hadn't. It had quietly turned him into the most prepared first-time rider his dealership had ever seen, the kind of guy who asked the salesman questions about ABS calibration that the salesman had to look up. He bought his first bike 2 years after retirement, at 53, with more real-world crash data in his head than most instructors ever collect in a career. He rides almost every weekend now. Nobody who knew him at 25 would have guessed it would take this long. Nobody who knows him now is surprised that it did. There's a laminated motorcycle safety course card behind his driver's license. He earned it at 29. He didn't buy a bike for another 14 years. To anyone who found that card in his wallet, it looks like a plan that stalled out somewhere along the way. It wasn't. He just kept waiting for the rest of his life to catch up to a decision his gut had already made. Kids old enough not to need him every hour. Savings solid enough to absorb a bad month. Judgment tested enough by 2 decades of high-stakes calls at work that taught him exactly what controlled risk feels like versus reckless risk. Confidence buys a bike at 22. Depth waits until it's actually built the version of itself that can survive owning one. The night he finally brought it up to his wife, he'd already rehearsed it 4 different ways in his head, the same way he rehearses a pitch to the board before he walks in. She said yes before he even finished the sentence. Turns out she'd been waiting for him to ask for 2 years, watching him talk himself out of it every spring when the weather turned. He'd spent that whole time protecting her from a decision she'd already made peace with long before he had. That's the trap smart men fall into hardest, running risk assessments on other people's feelings instead of just asking them what they actually think. So why does it take some men until 40 or 50 to finally throw a leg over a bike? And why do some men never do it at all? This is where it flips. The years of waiting were never wasted years. They were the exact years he needed to become someone who could ride well instead of just ride young. Every year he didn't buy the bike, he was quietly building the thing that actually keeps a rider alive on a curve at 60 miles an hour: judgment, restraint, the instinct to check twice before he ever needs to check once. Speed was never the hard part. Knowing himself well enough to trust his own reactions was. You probably know the other guy too, the one who's talked about getting a bike for 20 years and still hasn't. He can tell you every reason it isn't the right time, in impressive, well-researched detail, down to the exact insurance premium for 3 different models he'll never own. He's read every spec sheet. He's watched every review twice. He's not being careful anymore, though. He's just found a very intelligent way to stay still, and calling it caution lets him avoid noticing the difference. Preparation without a finish line stops being wisdom. It becomes a well-reasoned excuse dressed up as responsibility, and it can last a lifetime if nobody ever calls it what it is. The men who actually do it rarely have a dramatic reason. It's not a health scare or a divorce or a birthday that ends in a 0. It's smaller than that. A Tuesday where the kids don't need him for the afternoon, and instead of adding it to the list of someday, he drives to the dealership and signs the paperwork before he can rerun the numbers one more time. Fast forward to a Saturday morning 2 years later. He's on a back road he's ridden 50 times, doing exactly the speed he planned, taking exactly the line he planned, present in a way his desk job never once made him feel in 20 years of sitting behind it. A younger rider blows past him doing twice the speed through the same curve, showing off for no one. He doesn't flinch, and he doesn't judge. He just keeps his line and lets the moment pass without a second thought. That's not caution anymore. That's mastery that took 40 years to build, and it doesn't need an audience to know it's real. Somewhere in his first year of riding, the question in his head changed. It used to be, have I accounted for everything that could possibly go wrong? Now it's just, have I accounted for enough to go? That's the whole shift, and it happened quietly, without him noticing the exact day it did. He didn't get braver. He just stopped needing permission from a version of himself that had already finished doing the work years ago. His son rides with him now, on the back for the time being, counting down the years until he can get his own license. His wife stopped worrying somewhere around the 20th ride, once she actually watched how he rides. Nothing like the reckless version of him she'd quietly braced for. His buddy from the parking lot at 26 is still riding too. Older now, a little slower, both of them laughing about how long it took one of them to catch up. And that old safety card is still in his wallet, laminate cracked at the corner, not as a reminder of the years he waited, but of the ones that made this version of him possible in the first place. So if you're a man in your 30s or 40s who still hasn't bought the bike, still keeps the idea folded up in a drawer somewhere, you didn't wait because you were scared. You waited because the man who could actually handle it hadn't finished being built yet, and some part of you already knew that. So tell me in the comments, what's the one thing you've been waiting to feel ready enough for? Someone reading this right now might be exactly one comment away from finally doing it.